I'm Jam Supernova and welcome to the Between the Lines podcast. It's all about an in-depth session with an artist that I've chosen to pick one song and we do a deep dive. Like it says on the tin, we go between the lines to find out about the personal experience, it's the craft of songwriting and what's gone into making that song an absolute gem. And I'm joined by Lapsley in this episode. Oh, pleasure, Lapsley. I mean, you've had a career that has spanned over a decade in this industry, and I feel like I've been aware of you, been a fan of you pretty much from the very beginning. And I love that you do all of the things. You know, when we first came out...
Yeah, can you tell under my eyes?
You do all of the things, honey. But when you first came out, it was like, you know, it was like this idea that Lapsley from her bedroom, you know, in the north of England. And then before you knew it, Radio 1 were playing, and people like Annie Mac were big supporters, and I was working the BBC around that time, so I kind of got to see it in real time. But this is your fourth album, right?
Yeah.
The track that we're going to break down is Church. We just listened to it in the studio. We need to do that more often. It's quite nice. I like it.
No, it's lovely. It's funny because out of all of the songs on like the new set list on tour, this is the hardest one to sing in terms of like, it brings up so many emotions.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, it's very vulnerable and raw. I mean, but even the whole album itself is a bit of a gear shift for you, like new chapter.
Yeah.
Being independent, growth, releasing it on your own record label, Her Own Records, which is aptly titled. And the album's called I'm a Hurricane, I'm a Woman in Love. Does it feel like you have arrived? Like this is the moment that you've been building to, you know, this 10-year career?
It's funny because I feel like you give you everything with each album, but at the same time, I've been stuck with the perception of who I am as an artist that has been, I guess, presented to the world 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I'm putting forward where I am now, which is the culmination of like 10 years of work. And I'm hoping that it won't just be something for like existing fans and people who've known me, but also take on a whole new kind of audience with this new direction.
It's like shedding a little bit, isn't it? Shedding skin.
Yeah. I think
being grateful of the body you've had to get you this far.
Yeah, I mean, I was like 16 when I started producing and I'm 28 now, which I have to remind myself is like still quite young, even though I feel like I've been in London for so long. Yeah.
I mean, even I saw someone comment on your Instagram, you know, you were talking about the new album, they're like, and this record, you're going to perform a tour, and they're like, yeah, but we're still going to ask for like Long Way Home, okay? Like, it's like, okay, it's fine.
It's funny because I used to hate performing the old songs. And in the same way that if I went to see my favourite artist and it was a song that meant a lot at a significant moment in my history.
Yeah.
I'd be like crying at the front getting them to play it. So I have a bit more respect for that.
It's a balance, isn't
there?
Yeah,
a bit more balance.
Yeah, it's about. I mean, and what the great thing is like the bigger the repertoire, the more places you can jump into, and the reversion stuff or
decision
medleys.
Paralysis.
Yeah. I could do this or this or this. Try being a DJ, babe. So many
all the songs in the world. Where do we go?
Just play one in this moment. But I really loved the first single, and I thought that it was a really great way for you to step out and say, hello, I'm an independent artist. I'm releasing an album on my own record label. This is the first song, you know, not from the album, but at the time it was the first song on your label, Independent, which is Church.
Yeah.
Why did Church feel like the right song for you to start this chapter with?
I feel like in a way a single is like the top of the iceberg and there's so much depth below it in terms of like the music that I make day to day, whether it's for myself and other people. And I wanted to make a statement, not just for in terms of like where my head's been at in the past few months, but also as a female non-binary focused label, to have a song so personal about my struggles with coming to terms with my own gender kind of felt like the natural stake in the ground for the first single. And also, in a way, it stands out on the record. There's a song called The Vision, which is a piece of like spoken word that leads into Church. And that was kind of like a placement to set up Church because it was so different to everything else on the record. More like thematically rather than like I guess there's a few other folky type songs. Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels like a kind of, I don't know, it was definitely like a sort
of...
I'm here, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll jump into the first verse, and I love how you write and the way that there's multiple verses, you know, before we get to the chorus.
Verses are my favourite part
really?
of the song, for sure.
Why? Because some people say the chorus.
I always start with verse 1. I think because you're introducing the audience into your world and you're setting the scene.
Yeah.
And I write lyrics really fast. It's kind of just like immediately regurgitated. And that first line, like, always tried to speak it for myself, loudest in the classroom. I'd just been thinking so much, and at the time, like going through therapy, like assessing how I perceived myself when I was a kid. And it was always like the funny, loud one in the classroom. And as an adult, like I struggle quite a lot in social situations, and somehow feel like I need to get back to that freedom and joy that maybe I had at that age. And so this is where the whole rabbit hole of the whole song kind of like unraveled, like from that first line onwards.
And would that be a line that popped into your head? Would that be a line, maybe post-therapy session that comes out? Like where would you have written it, or would it have been in the studio?
I was in Sweden when I wrote this. I do like writing trips because I work as a writer for other people. So this was kind of a trip to meet quite a few producers and writers that I plan to go back in with for other artists in the future. We just got out the guitar and immediately, I guess the best lyrics come out of like a state of play.
Yeah.
In a sense that like, it's like asking a comedian who's doing stand-up, like how they came to that conclusion when they were writing it. And often it's just like, they're just following the waterfall and seeing where it lands. And I don't put any pressure on myself, especially if there's no goal for the session, for example, like if it's not for another artist, if it's not finishing another thing, if there's a complete blank slate, I don't put any rules on where the waterfall could lead me. And I think also spending some time away from London, whenever I travel, I always gain this like weird perspective on my life and
zooming out.
Yeah. Just because like, especially living in a big city, we're so consumed with like our friends and their lives and bills and like the constant rush and traveling. So that was an opportunity to kind of take a step back, and ultimately that's where that first verse landed. The whole thing was written in about half an hour.
Wow, I love hearing things like that.
It took a long time to build up the vocals. I will talk about it later on. There's so much to talk about with this song, actually. I'm glad you chose it.
I'm glad I really love the record. I think I resonated a lot with it, and this idea of kind of someone like, actually, I started therapy this year, in part from the podcast, because everyone I spoke to was doing therapy. And I was like, maybe I should not think that I am above doing therapy, and I think I should probably do some work on myself as well.
It's funny what you find at the bottom of the
there's a lot coming out, honey. Yeah. But I wondered, that loud, Holly Lapsley in the classroom, that spoke up for herself and, was loudest in the classroom. Where do you feel like that person maybe got ebbed away a little bit? Or did it?
Yeah, for sure. I think I could pinpoint to signing a major indie deal when I was 18, and immediately that kind of free will was taken away from me, in a sense that like my life now is guided 100% by me. And when you have so many people involved from a label and management, there's so many different voices that I wasn't used to in regards to my art, which was always like a private thing in my safe space in my bedroom. And it was way too much of like a contrast and a change, and being sent to LA and like working with some really big producers who've worked on some of the biggest records of all time, and them just like talking over me and like assuming that not really letting me set up my laptop and produce in my way. And that had quite a significant effect. So I would say like it wasn't until after lockdown that I really, towards the end of lockdown, that I really kind of realised the extent to which the first half of my career affected my confidence.
Yeah.
And therefore it was a bit of a personal journey to get back to me. And in a way, I think this record kind of documents that, because the record's about love, and part of that is the love for myself, and part of that is looking back in time.
And loving that. Yeah. And given, you said something in another interview, like hugging that version of yourself, that 18-year-old that signed that deal, giving her a hug. Saying like, I'm here for you. And we did it, kind of thing.
And there's more similarities with that, that teenage version of me, then I think I used to see it as like this, that was such an immature version of me. And yet that was a version where I was like the most happiest. So I've tried to inspire myself by the past to find more balance in my life.
And how would you, when you're signing a deal at that age, whether it's with a major indie or major commercial label, how would you have known any different at 18?
No, you don't. And also, because it's so rare to get offered an opportunity like that, you're not really given a space to complain.
No, different time.
Because you are so privileged and so lucky, and there's so many musicians that would kill to get that kind of opportunity. And the last thing you want to do is say that it's not working for you, or it's not on your terms, or you feel squashed in a way. So yeah.
And I think times have changed so much. We're talking about a time that was
massively
8 years ago or so. 9 years ago. So much has changed since then. There's so much more information out there, but I think it's really important to talk about sometimes the, our dream jobs or the things that we get when we're young and we want so much, or we think we want. It's okay for it to not always be right for us, and for us to outgrow those positions, or during it to be like, no, maybe that didn't feel so good, or maybe I didn't feel so valued, or maybe this and that. In the second part of that verse 1, you say, but you felt like an essay paper, an echo chamber other people choose.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. Like I went to a state school in Southport, which is like North Liverpool. And when
Southport Weekender.
Yeah, Southport Weekender. God, that's a whole other chat.
Yeah, there's a different chapter.
Sneaking out into Southport Weekender.
So lucky, what an education.
Genuinely. But didn't impact this song.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Different chapter.
I was super academic, and in that sense, you pretty much carry the weight of the school in terms of like, we want to send you to Oxbridge, like you're either going to be like a doctor or a lawyer, like it's kind of like you're a success story from like a state education. And that's like a lot of pressure on a young person without even asking what it is that they're interested in. And this assumption that like I would forego the arts for that, because I was also really good at drama and music, and that's what actually made me happy. It's like no one stopped and asked me like, does chemistry really bring you joy? And it's funny because I have a cousin who's a chemist, and it actually genuinely does bring them joy.
Yeah.
But there was this pressure from the school and my parents, and so I didn't do GCSE music or drama. I did triple science and to A level, and like double English and geography, and it's not that I didn't enjoy it. Like I enjoy academia because I like being pushed in every direction because I'm interested in the world. But most of all, I'm interested in people.
Yeah.
And trying to understand the world and understand myself. And that's the arts. And English was probably like the thing I most enjoyed within all of the like academic pressures. But You Felt Like an Essay Paper is because my entire youth was like made up of revising and doing exams, and then sneaking off at the weekends to do the things that I actually enjoyed.
Wow.
Like sneaking out the house to go and help produce for a band when I was like a teenager, going to raves, like because I was obsessed with electronic music, going to Southport Weekender. The arts had a way of like creeping in, and if I wasn't allowed to do it, I'd do it. Not illegally. Well, yeah. But like I was a child, so but doing behind everyone's back. Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure, and I think actually we place a lot of academic pressure often on young girls. When you said that about the school sort of pushing you, I had a flashback. I remember like I did like, GCSEs and stuff and like that, but I remember saying to one of the teachers that I wasn't going to go to uni. I didn't want to go to uni. She was like, I just think you're being very, very stupid. You're being very ridiculous. Like, why wouldn't you go to uni? You're going to waste your life,
100%
And I just
with
didn't
that.
want.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to. I wanted to go to the Brit school. So you're going to do a BTEC. I was like, yeah, I want to do a BTEC, and then I want to just like go out there. But I was so concentrated in that like. That teenage 14 to 16, I had like mood maps everywhere, developed like an addiction to eating ice, which in hindsight could have been worse. Like I was eating 100 cubes a day just to like, I think I was just so stressed
Yeah.
I was stressed.
So the brain does funny things when you're under intense
And then
pressure.
I was just like, got to the Brit School, did like 1 year of like AS level English literature. I was like, no, do you know what? Like,
Yeah.
to the arts we go.
Yeah.
Throw caution to the wind. So hearing that and then thinking about, the pressure that we put on girls academically and the pressure we put on ourselves as well inwardly. It's not just what's coming outwardly, but it's inwardly as well to succeed, to be perfect. It's a lot.
Huge, yeah. And I think there was an added thing from parents where like they're like first generation from working class that went to university. It was all free for them in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so they had the weight of their parents, which of like finally making it out. Not of the ends, because it's like the edge of the city. Well, I guess it is.
Relatively so.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Relative
but
ends.
like the way that they've taken their family out of poverty
Yes.
is through education.
Yes.
And so there's this added pressure of like, if you do the arts, if you do something that isn't secure, it triggers them as if like we're all going to return back to this like
100%.
60s and 70s where they grew up and there wasn't enough food like in terraced housing. And like I can see that now that pressure was like linked to that, which is quite a recent perspective that I've gained.
Yeah. And they were doing what they had with the tools that they had, and there wasn't that sort of, that knowledge as well. That, I mean, when you got your deal, what did they say?
In one way, they were like, trust Holly to land something like this. Like I always did the most like unexpected thing, and I was always like wheeler dealer doing like 4 things in the background that they didn't know about. But I think how it impacted my ability to advocate for myself is because I knew how special that opportunity was. I didn't want to like let anyone down.
Yeah.
And so I was determined to have a life that equals the success of if I'd have gone down the path that had been put on me.
Yeah.
Which is healthy and unhealthy.
Yeah, agreed.
And also one of the reasons why like I don't give up. I'm dropped multiple times. I pick myself up. I keep going.
Yeah.
And I find a way to go through.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is because of this wanting to prove everyone that I can have a job in the arts, weirdly, which it's funny because I speak on panels a lot and I like mentor young artists, and it's like, it's a very tough industry to be in for all of us involved at every level.
But I understand what you mean. It's like, haha, look, I can do it. I can live off my art. You said I couldn't, and I can. I'm doing it. And I think it's that. It's you wanting to also kind of help reframe them, because they would have had goals and dreams in other ways as well. And definitely for my parents, like my mum come to London to be to do drama with 2 kids at the age of 21, but she couldn't sustain it.
Yeah.
She had to get a job in the end, a different kind of job that was sustainable. My dad was an actor up until I was about 10, but he wasn't able to sustain.
Yeah.
And I know that deep down they still have the love for that, for the arts or for drama or for reading or whatever.
Oh, massively. They're definitely, you're born.
Yeah,
like,
you're not going to lose it.
Inclined, yeah.
And my mum's only just come back to write to really giving herself to it now at the age of 55. So there is a kind of, and I think she is in part inspired by what I have been able to do. So I understand that pressure. In verse 2, would it be classed as verse 2 or still part of verse 1? Because Rap Genius, it'd be breaking it up,
Yeah, it's funny. In the writing world, we say everything that comes before the first chorus is verse 1, but I'd note the second part of verse 1.
Okay, second part of verse 1. Over time, an avalanche snowed on every olive branch I grew. Learned to play their selfish ways, hope to find new solace in their rules. I really love the opposing sort of imagery you've created, the idea of the olive branch, which you think of like, I would like link to Mediterranean weather, but then the avalanche and this as kind of the snow.
Also, like an olive branch is what you give to a friend who's done wrong. I think the avalanche was the industry, but also this song as a whole is about my realization of the impact of the patriarchy on my life that I've only come to realize since becoming an adult. And it made me quite a bitter and competitive person. And so I guess it's that notion of like this avalanche of the industry and and not only that, being a female artist in this space made me less of a nice person, made me a worse friend. Learn to play their selfish ways, hope to find new solace in their rules. I was copying those around me, and I was around like very self-involved people who didn't have good communication or teamwork skills. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really powerful to hear, to hear that side and to be able to confront the patriarchy, but also to know that patriarchy is also ingrained within us as well. And it's the journey that we go on to unlearn it, which is very real. It's a very
it's a lifetime journey.
And that kind of the bitterness, the jealousness, does that come from the idea that there can only be one?
I think the patriarchy pits women against each other in the arts.
Yeah.
Which is really dark, and I've had to unravel that. And at the same time that I started in the music industry, I was on like my own understanding of my own sexuality and queerness, which then ultimately I ended up coming out as bisexual. And addressing the own misogyny and like homophobia within myself through going on that process was wild.
How did you unpick it?
I think I had a fear of my love for women at the same, like I fancied girls as I fancied boys when I was a teenager. But it was something that was so secretive and shameful and came out as actually like significant friendship issues and struggling with other women, that when I actually went deep was actually because I fancied them and I didn't know how to process those feelings. And it's funny because like, there's so many like young men that talk about like even heterosexual men being like not nice to women because they fancy women. It's also like a product of the patriarchy. So kind of like unraveling that darkness was a huge weight that was lifted. And now I always talk about like my sexuality purely because it's, first of all, like bisexuality isn't really talked about. No, it's kind of seen, it's like this mysterious side of the LGBTQ community. But if I'd have had way more visibility, I think it would have helped me understand a lot of aspects of myself when I was younger.
Definitely.
I think. Yeah.
Definitely. When did you feel the pressure of the patriarchy? Was there any, if I was to think back to when I never really thought about it, maybe, like growing up, I was just told you have to work twice as hard because you're a girl and you're black, you're going to have to work, twice as hard. So there was that. I kind of had to do everything my brother did, but to get my dad's attention, and I'd have to be like, I played football, I played PlayStation, I call myself Jamal,
I love that.
Yeah, but that was the only way to be in their bubble. Then I carried on playing football till I was 16, and then at secondary school, I just kind of like mostly, it was actually quite a matriarchal school. Like the girls were like really fierce and like really like upfront, and if you weren't part of one of their crews, then you kind of out in the open.
I was in an all-girls state school,
I couldn't have done that. Huge. Wow. Yeah. I just played football till I was about 15. That. Every break time, all I did was play football. I always keep my head down and play football. But then obviously, then you start to like have desires and you want to be fancied, and I think that maybe through like, I wanted to be one of the boys, but I also wanted the boys to fancy me. And it was just this weird kind of, I don't know, like a weird space to be in. It's hard, we weren't taught how to be friends, really, you know. And then I think in the sort of wider working industry, that idea of being pitted against, there could only be one female DJ at a time. That was big when I was coming through, or a handful, and you had to be better than her. That was just that. It
was like the oddity to like balance the books.
Yeah. Only one can come through. Sorry, okay, door shut now.
Yeah.
And you had that competitive spirit that it had to be you, and I've had to do a lot of like unlearning. Yeah. I still have to unpick that sometimes. You don't have to be better than her. Why did you got to be better than her?
Yeah.
Does it matter? Does it matter? No.
No, I know. And I still like. It's funny because like one of the singles on the record called "Woman Like That" is all about like jealousy with other women and that internalized like, well, we put it on ourselves, like the comparison.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I had such a idyllic childhood in the sense of like, with my brother and all of my male cousins, we kind of like all grew up together because my mum and her sister kind of supported each other. They both lost their mum when they were young. And so I was always just like one of the boys. And then I went up through the Cubs and the Scouts and the Explorers, which is like where I learned to sail. And like I had all these amazing opportunities that like built my confidence and gave me amazing people skills. And I developed some like lifelong friendships in the Scouts, which is quite like a random thing that no one talks about.
We got the Scouts. I so badly wanted to be a beaver.
Yeah,
my mum wouldn't let me. She said, I won't use the terminology she used, but I think she was scared of
the first female cub in the district.
Wow.
So I was like a rainbow and then a brownie, and then I was like, I'm not doing this. I want to do archery.
Yeah, I can just see you now.
yeah, no fear. So, and then everything changed in high school, and I still had like the sports in the background, which was huge. But then suddenly I moved to London on my own when I was 17 and then signed the deal, and I was thrust into adulthood and the world of adulthood. And I was so naive into the way in which men and women are treated in the workplace, in society, on nights out, the entire thing. And I've almost been like shaded from it. And it's this grief of a future of equality that I expected, that I talk about in this song. Really, it's like a sadness of a future that never existed, but I was made to think existed. I grew up as if I'd be treated the same for the rest of my life as my brother and my male cousins.
And I do think that was kind of, I don't think it was, you didn't make it up, you know.
Yeah.
There was this idea that you'd grow up and everything, you would be equal. Why wouldn't you be?
Why would you tell a little girl that like the reality of what it's like to be within a patriarchal world?
Yeah, when you get in the workplace, they're going to speak over you, you know, or you have to. It was like what was that film? Act Like a Woman, Think Like a Man.
Oh no!
There was like a whole film that kind of like this woman was in the workplace, but that didn't come out until like the latter half of like the 2010s, you know. But yeah, as a child, you just didn't assume that there would be this point where everything sort of goes so far in the other way.
Yeah.
And even up until, you know, even in college, it still feels like a somewhat of a level playing ground. And then even in uni, you know, there's still, you know.
It's like you're trying to understand the world in those years, whether it's like with relationships, with friends, with careers, you're like trying out everything because it's all so new to you for the first time.
But you went straight in, you got dropped into an industry of adults.
Yeah. And like my friends are 10, 15 years older and most of them are on my payroll. It's a strange thing, but
yes, the dynamics.
Yeah.
And were you know, when you're starting to be like, fuck, oh my God, this is weird, like, you know, this is happening, like, were you able to have like conversations with people at that time to talk about these issues? Like, I know now, like, there's a lot of theory, and there's obviously theory's always been there, but you'd have had to engage in the theory or speak to people in sort of like-minded situations to kind of be able to access theory on that for you to understand it.
Yeah, I think pre-COVID, it wasn't a safe, appropriate time for me to speak to the people around me about the issues. In contrast, and I also work as a writer and work with so many young artists, there's such a different support system around them and management, which is so healthy, and weirdly, like, just to see that like heals my like inner young person. But I guess my instinct was like to get a completely new team every time I got dropped. And so fight or flight, I definitely was a bit more of a flight person than to go back and bring up the past and face things. And that's just what I've done for my peace and my mental health. But I do talk objectively a lot about the impacts of like specific circumstances. Yeah,
definitely. And what about now, the conversations that, you know, when you speak to, you know, your female friends, your non-binary friends, when you're sort of sitting down and talking about the patriarchy, you know, if you think about this song, what are some of the conversations that come up now for you?
Something that I didn't have that I now have is a strong group of like women and non-binary people within my like that I work with, but also like as my friends, and that didn't exist for me. And to say that like you are like, I don't know, the product of, or the average of like your group of friends, I now surround myself with really good people that like advocate for other women and minorities. And that has changed my outlook on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I believe that I believe that your outlook can change.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's kind of why I feel so annoyed that we're so polarized online, because by being around such different people, you know, you can come to different conclusions. You can open your ear. You can be like, I didn't think of it like that, you know.
Yeah, massively.
And that's why I love the dance floor.
Yeah.
That's where the intersection of people, you know, really happens. And I've had some funny conversations like in the toilets, you know, like,
Yeah.
But there's a freedom in knowing that we're all from different
it's like
walks of life.
problem shared, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's jump into the bit before the chorus, still in verse 1. Anger grew like lichen. Trust me, girl, I've tried to fight and break it. Try to take their building down, but structurally, there ain't no way to change it. That part, structurally, there ain't no way to change it.
Yeah.
I always felt like I feel a pang of sadness.
Yeah, there is a sadness because there is, I think, although we're all working to, like, within our intersexual feminism, we're all trying to make changes. But ultimately, it's such a big, to change, it's like saying, let's change capitalism. It's so ingrained. It's everything that our world is built on, our modern world in the West, that there's a sadness that throughout my lifetime, it will never exist, and probably throughout my daughters. And so that's kind of an existential sadness, I guess. Yeah. And I talk about anger because that's kind of an emotion that we've been taught never to express, or it's been perceived in like a very specific way. And this is an anger, and I say lichen because it's something that like is slow growing.
What is lichen?
Lichen is like, you know, when you see on the top of a house, there's sometimes like, it looks like moss.
The green stuff.
Yeah. It's funny because like lichen is actually like a cross between a fungi and a plant. It's like a hybrid species.
Did you know this?
I'm not sure. I think, yeah.
I don't know
this. I'm really good on a pub quiz. Like,
I love that.
Capital cities and lichen.
Fungi and mold.
Yeah. Cool, but there's just this like this slow, this idea of something growing slowly and naturally, like lichen on a surface, is the way that this anger has like arrived in my life, in like, since becoming an adult.
Yeah, so it's like the slow burn.
The slow burn, and it's occurred naturally, and it's healthy to have, but it's also a hard thing to release.
Well, knowing how to release it, or the channels, because there's been a lot of resounding things that have come up through the episodes with different artists, and anger is one. You know, how do you be informed about what's happening in the world, be informed about, you know, how to move the world forward, progress not just our lives but the lives of others? How do we not be consumed by the anger to the point of not doing anything?
It's funny because your therapist tells you to sit in the emotion, and that's like an important thing to do for your brain to process it properly. But sitting within anger is a hard thing to do because you feel like there needs to be an action that follows. And seeing that action as doing a healthy action, such as like going to a protest, or like even just meeting up with your friends and like having an open and interesting discussion, can be an outlet. For me, it used to be like sport was a huge outlet for my kind of aggression in the world in an appropriate way, in hockey, or like when I was competing with sailing, like there was an aggressive edge to the sport which was like acceptable. But my frustration would be like taken out within the process of like, you know, getting my heart and my breathing going and exercise. And now like I go for dog walks for like, so I work in the afternoons and evenings now. Like the studio is like 12 till 6, and then my label team is in the evening because they're in the States.
Okay, so you flipped your whole day.
Yeah. So I go out for 2 hours with the dog, and I listen to my podcast, and I like stomp down the River Lee for like hours, and that's how I let everything out in an active way before I start my day, whether that's like positive things or negative or angry or anxieties. It's just like an outlet before I start my musical outlet.
Yeah, I mean, then by the
Yeah.
time then, so when you come then to like put the pen on the page or then come to write, do you feel like you're clearer or you're
Yeah, I think
unblocked?
so. I think there's like often the things that you want to write about are the things that like sit behind. And once you get the immediate feelings of the day to day, you actually like, well, for me anyway, once I release them in the morning, you know, the song's not going to be about an argument that I had with my sister the night before. The song's going to be about how the distance between us has caused this riff, which is the underlying thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I structure my day that way.
Yeah. I'm fascinated about at the moment about how people start their day. I've been trying to get up earlier, so like to have a bit of time before anybody else wakes up in the house, for my daughter, my partner, and dog, and like go into either do journal or run or swim. Like someone couldn't believe that you've already swum. It's like 8 a.m. I was like, yeah, I've been for a swim already. Like, but
Oh,
it's
that's
just
so
yeah,
cool.
but it's something like you. But then I don't come back and I'm not snappy.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
irritable. I'm like, come on, let's get your packed lunch together. Like, you know,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
rushing everybody. And then when I sit down to do work at 9, I start with the thing that I want to do the most. And I'm fast, I'm sharp, like, and I'm not worrying about anything else because I know I've got time
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to do it. I think that's how you
That's
start your
such a
day.
lovely rhythm to your day.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't always work like that.
Yeah, I
Monday
was
to
gonna say with a
Wednesday,
kid, wow.
Thursday, Friday's out the window. It's gone. But talk to me a little bit about your writing style. You know, you sort of mentioned the pub quiz and like knowing, like even referencing liking to create that sort of imagery.
Yeah.
But also to be abstract in it, to have the personal moments of like, trust me, girl. You know, like
Yeah.
it's kind of colloquial. How would you describe your writing style?
I think I use a lot of visual metaphors. I'm a very like visual person, and within my like love of literature and reading, the best work has always I've always been able to empathize with the character or put myself in their position through the world that the writer builds. And there's something so open-ended about visual metaphors where it's very specific to like a nuanced feeling, but in a way that only you could add the nuance to. It's like saying, what does the color green evoke? Like we'd all have a specific opinion of that. And yet if I said like, for me, when I talk about the color green, I'll go back to like Shakespeare's use of like the green-eyed monster, which is like the first use of that term in regards to the color green with jealousy. And I find that so fascinating. But another person, that'll remind them of like their grandma's backyard and the plants, or like the color of like their auntie's bathroom, or like a specific thing. And so that kind of like the visual openness in language is something that I can both apply my own story and allow other people to add theirs, I think.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot because everyone can find a meaning within it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And speaking of the world, you know, for this album, I've been like deep in your Instagram. The world that you've created for I'm a Hurricane, I'm a Woman in Love is insane. Like I was so okay. So I mean, and you tell me the world and then I'll go
yeah.
jump in. Tell us the world you created.
I wanted to paint love as like an extreme female emotion. Like love is at the center of my life, in the sense that like a lot of my writing has been around the role of love within my life, with family, with friends, with myself, with my relationships. It's like the central point. But it's not like pink and rosy as maybe love written by a man is perceived, or like love within modern culture is perceived and seen as like either saccharine or like super romantic, or like sexually driven. For me, it's like it's an all-encompassing word for dark and light aspects of my life. I wanted like an archetype of a strong woman, so I looked to like warriors of the past. So we have like the Boudica references, we have like Joan of Arc, and these like very misunderstood women where who they are and what they stand for has kind of been like put on them, and yet they have this like overwhelming like defiance about them. So that was a huge part of it in terms of like the visual side of it. The album talks about a relationship that I had with two people, and it's quite complex because that's definitely like it's quite an odd thing to have, like
At the same time.
yeah. So we don't really talk about like polyamory often, like, or dating more than one person. It's often seen as like taboo, or that we only have a finite amount of love for one person, and that it's this strange idea to love another. And so it documents me falling in love with the second person, all like above board, and then ultimately deciding to be with one of those two people.
Wow.
And then ending, which is why I end on this song called like Lilac Hues, which is like, I'm in the middle of a drawbridge with ships passing in the night. I know it's got to rise, it's inevitable time. This kind of societal pressure of like, if I want kids, if I want all of these quite traditional things, I have to choose.
Or choose for a period of time.
Yeah, and trying to work out if like the reasoning to like make that decision is like truly independent, or if it's like influenced by like heteronormativity. Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we haven't even like touched the iceberg of polyamory in society. Like we were starting to talk about it, but there's no, and we haven't got past the point that you've got to. You know, that idea, like that. I feel like that's the bit that no one has the answer for.
For sure.
Like anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough thing to manage in terms of like the communications with more than one person and making sure everyone's happy. But it suited me, and they were both going through divorces at the same time. And ultimately, one of those people was the person I made the record with, Greg Abrahams, who we're now friends. And he was the person who we decided to end it for the sake of like our artistic relationship and wanting different things in life. But the songs like Jericho, which is about like the changing state of the studio it used to be this place where me and Greg were like, it was super intimate and free, and like creativity was like completely boundless. If you think about not only being there with the person that you love and is closest to you in the world, but like making art with them.
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy. And what's the line? I'm not here to tell you that I want you back. I've got your back, but I want it bad. That's a bit of a sexy one. But like,
that is a sexy one. I mean, how did you? I mean, I'm trying to think, and I'm trying to put myself in that situation whether I could be that vulnerable with someone that I had feelings with. I think I'm actually quite a guarded person.
It was insane. It was the nuttiest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
I started that record with Greg, and then my current partner came into our lives, and then I had to go back to South Africa and finish the record with Greg, who I was then no longer in a relationship with.
Wow.
And to sit back in that space and to finish those songs that were written in one place and needed to be finished as we were in a different place was emotionally wild. But weirdly, to put us in that pressure cooker was what made this album so special.
Yeah.
To really sit there and feel those feelings and act on them in an artistic way. So it is nutty. And I wanted to kind of bring that unhinged aspect to the visuals and to the, like, there's quite unhinged statements in like a lot of the records.
Yeah. I mean, even for this record, like I feel like you've gone on also a journey with yourself and like your body and your sexuality and your sensuality. Like, you mentioned about the sort of the women, the defiant women, and you had recreated images. You see it on your Instagram. There's a picture of you, kind of, a bold picture, I would say. And then if you swipe, you get to see the references of those pictures, which I thought was really a really nice way to bring people in.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm semi-naked in most of my images now. But that's because I was always told to like hide my body in the first half of my career. And I've struggled with my understanding of like what it means, like femininity. And for me, the purest form of my femininity is just my body, because I've struggled with like understanding where I sit from like a fashion perspective. And I'm slowly coming to terms of what being womanly means to me, but it's took like a long time. And so that celebration of the female form in its purest form is what you see when you go on my Instagram, rather than like the sexual impact being like the first thing, the reason, if that makes sense.
But it's the feminine, the connecting with your
yeah, and I
femininity.
find it quite tongue-in-cheek that parts of my body are sexualized, and the algorithm makes it fly, and it's suddenly like the best images that do well, because it's the patriarchy. Like, it sells. It's wild.
Yeah. But your intentions are different though. You're coming at it from a different place, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's what I find really inspiring. You're coming at it from a different place. You're coming at it from a place of power. It's powerful.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's activism in a way.
Yeah, radical activism. Damn right. Yeah. The chorus. I'm a church with no steeple. I'm a compass with no point. Too much for you to handle. I'm too loud with my voice.
Yeah, there's definitely some like phallic references there.
Oh, really?
With like this idea of, I'm told that I'm this big powerhouse, but I don't have men's private parts, and so therefore there's a limit to what I can achieve. And so this idea of like, obviously it's not to using church as like is a metaphor of like the religion.
Yeah.
Patriarchy is the religion, that's the house, and
Of course.
So there will always be limits to my church without the steeple, and then there will always be limits to where I can go because I don't have a compass point. So
that's genius. Actually,
yeah,
genius.
And then too much for you to handle. I'm too loud with my voice. I was always such a loud person, and very impulsive, and my friends will say that's like the best part about me. Yep. Can get a bit rowdy in a pub, and then they'll be like, all right, love, calm down. But like, rather be that than not be able to say what was on my mind, which again, the first half of my career, I felt like I'd become this like quite quiet, aloof person.
Yeah, when I first met you, I thought, oh, she's really quiet.
Yeah,
I remember her thinking that. And then I saw you the other day in in Margate. I was like, whoa, Lapsy's not quiet. You were having a dance, you were skanking, but we came over, and I was just like, it was not the Lapsy that I remember. But there's something my aunt did once, Reiki, on me. And the voice box started like going mad. It just was like shaking so hard, like
that
couldn't
energy.
Control it. And she was like, you're not speaking your mind.
That's so interesting.
You're not, I think I was like 21 or something. And I think I had made myself palatable and small and, in relationships and at work, I just didn't want to rock the boat.
Yeah.
But it was just all like, building up there. And I just remember that. Yeah, I remember that Reiki session and it being like really crazy. And that
and also from like a matriarch in your family to allow you to be in that space is wild.
Yeah, definitely. But I thought that the church with no steeple, the compass with no point, I definitely got that kind of feeling of somewhat being lost, but
yeah, for sure.
And I had this conversation the other day about the church and religion, and I know obviously everyone has their own sort of relationship to faith, but the purest aspect of religion I can be down with, but the way it's interpreted is often interpreted from a man.
100%.
And that's the part that I struggle with. My family on one side, I wasn't growing up that way, but they're all Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so who told you that means that? And they're like, the elders. And I'm like, so who's the elders? They're like, this, this. And it always comes back to some old man.
Yeah, I'm like really interested in like Abrahamic religions. And the amount of amazing, well, I want to call it literature, but obviously it's like people's holy
books, it's incredible writing, of course.
Like the level of misogyny I don't read, and that's why I can only come to an assumption that it's like it's been put on us by the men who are reading, the men who are leading, and yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, it's a
we're
tricky
diving
one.
off.
Yeah. I mean,
but
the whole
it was-
this is Tangent FM.
Yeah,
by
something
the
I
way.
wanted to say was
Yeah.
like, I shot the music video for this in the family church that my family had been married and buried in for like hundreds of years,
Wow.
and have farmed the land nearby.
Wow.
So there's roads nearby that have like the family, well, my grandma's like second name on. So they
Wow.
like worked the land for so long. And I think about, I'm dancing in front of my grandma's grave, and she's buried next to her mum, and she died a few years ago. And I think about the lives that they had as a woman, with whether that, with men of that time, which were either like violent or dismissive or absent. And it was this surreal thing of like, I wanted to prove that there was progress, but I'm not sure how much progress has been made. And so it kind of, it was a strange video because we shot it all in one take, and then there was no like preparation or choreography, but the way that I moved within that land, surrounded by the women and the matriarchs that I loved, but with that much pain and expectation that I'd put on myself, it was just like this surreal emotional experience filming the music video for this song.
Was it something like sort of carnal that came out when you were dancing? Was it?
Yeah, I think so. Very like in my own head in a way.
And you wore your grandfather's kilt.
And I wore my granddad's kilt. Yeah.
Yeah, and even that is kind of playing with timelines, playing with the energy.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought that was really, really, really cool. I love the
Thanks.
video for it. And that kind of takes us to, they said when you're older, the power will shift. But I'm 20-something in my prime years. I still don't see it. It's, I mean, I think, how then do you not be pessimistic then? How then, what can you see any positives? Do we need to see positives to be able to keep moving somewhat forward?
I don't think you need to have one or the other. I feel like there is some things that I'm hugely pessimistic about, and other things that I've seen progress within my lifetime and I'm super happy about, whether that's like, best friends leaving someone in a relationship and finding their true calling in their career, or like whatever it is. There's like the small acts of joy and progress, even if there's this like existential fear like within the world, and the rise of populism, and like I feel like I shouldn't have to choose between the pessimism and optimism. I'm quite extreme on both sides, and that's what I think is kind of shown within these words. Yeah,
and I think societally it's like kind of like we're coming out of the positive porn. Where you can only be put. It's always like, oh, just keep on smiling. Everything's perfect. Like we're starting to see that sort of crumble away. But then there's also trying to find, I guess, if there is, trying to find a middle ground to that. What literature do you read? Is there any sort of feminist literature? I saw something about a quote that you'd referenced, Virginia Woolf.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm reading this amazing book at the moment called The Politics of Motherhood.
That sounds good.
And it's like one of the best essays I've ever read in my life about the history of the mother, from the 20th and 21st century, and how being a mother is inherently a political thing, and the way in which motherhood is attached to the state, whether that's like through the nursery and the school system, to being able to access benefits and maternity pay, and only being allowed to give birth, to do with like where you give birth and the rights around birth. And it has blown my little mind. And it's funny because I trained as a doula back in the day. I took a year out after my second world tour, and I lived in Manchester, and I trained as a doula, and I worked with teenage girls, and that changed my entire perspective on like the power of women.
What made you choose the being a doula? It's a very specific music. 2 albums, 2 albums in, doula.
I think whenever I have like quite internal battles about myself and my ego and my identity, looking outwards has always been a place that I've found solace. So that's like volunteering and helping others and work and learning a new skill, and being the only woman on the course who hadn't had a baby. Doing the doula course was quite interesting, and trying to absorb all the stories and learn from the women around me. But I think through that, like I was going through quite, I guess the dysphoria is maybe the word, to do with like my own understanding of what it meant to be a woman. And I guess that like that craving for knowledge also was like, I'm going to put myself with other women and serve other women. And maybe that will help me work out and answer some of my questions.
Did it?
I think some of them, yeah. But I think time has been the greatest thing in terms of answering questions. Just getting wise.
She growing. I mean, you not only did a doula course and trained to become a doula, but you also went to university.
Oh yeah. That was another after the next. Oh, I've just been dropped. What do I do now?
And went to Goldsmiths.
Yeah, I did PPE at Goldsmiths.
And what's that for people that don't know?
Politics, philosophy, and economics.
What did that teach you about womanhood or the world and womanhood?
Oh, it was so much fun. Mainly, actually, what it taught me was to be able to access information properly. And the reason why, so I left after 1 year, mainly because I was like, I've always wanted to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer. And then I'm going to use the money that I make to then start a label. And ultimately, I've done all of those things, right? But like, I realized through that process that I built up my whole life that education was something that you accessed in university. And now I understand that education is like your entire lifetime. And there is nothing stopping me from picking up a book, from comparing sources, from listening to a podcast, from speaking to my friends. And once I removed that kind of weirdly archaic and classist view that like you have to access a university to be an educated person, it took me racking up student
and a year of
being a student, which I absolutely loved, but ultimately there was power in quitting. And I've never been told that I was ever allowed to quit anything, to the point where like I know how to play loads of instruments to a really low level because I wasn't allowed to quit an instrument. I just had to acquire another one because my parents and like anyway.
It's quite full circle though, the idea of like, you know, choosing music over academia, but then dipping your toes back in to
on my terms,
on your
and
terms.
then quitting on my terms.
On your terms.
And that was like, I remember going into my therapist and just being like, I quit and I feel so empowered by it. I've never quit anything in my life. And it's this thing that held such a power over me in terms of how I saw myself as a failure or not. I'm very much like let's do something actively to work through it, as you can see, whether that's like go to uni or doing a course. Like
I like
making an album.
Some of the thing that I can find a lot of parallels because I thought about maybe I should go to uni because I never went to uni, and maybe I'm not an academic, maybe I'm not a student, or maybe I'm not like, you know, maybe I missed out on something by not going. But you saying that you can always pick up a book, you can always access a podcast, like you can always, you know, do something like that. That kind of is where I'm at right now. And to kind of hear it back, I'm like, that's exactly what I'm doing. I feel like I'm learning every day. I'm trying to learn something every day. The podcast that I pick, reading theory, like again through this podcast, speaking to people like Ice Boy Violet or Yaya Bay or Lycan. I'm going to be learning about Lycan and reading feminist theory, you know. And it's like, I'm like, okay, but your brain can always be expanded, and it doesn't take having to maybe do a course in that way to expand it. So then you started writing for others. So we left uni.
Yeah.
Then you start writing for other people.
I'd started writing for others at the start of uni, and managed, and then, which was tough. It's funny because like every publisher says, I went to my publisher initially and was like, I want to be a writer, and they were like, every artist says that. Cool, like good luck with that. Then I got dropped by my publishing, and just messaged all of the writers, producers, everyone I knew to get a foot in the door.
Wow.
So I was then doing multiple studio sessions with loads of like up and coming small artists.
So that became the job.
Yeah,
it is a job.
but like obviously like unpaid, a lot of the work didn't come out. But I was really like chomping at the bit to get my foot in the door, and I knew that like if I did a good job with that artist, the manager that manages that artist usually manages bigger artists, and more I'd just be known for being a solid, dependable person that can reach the end of the day with an amazing demo that artist and producer is proud of. By the end of the year, I'd quit uni and got a brand new publishing deal off the back of everything that I'd done, and I got a Charlie XCX cut
Wow.
And
What was the song?
Out Out.
Wow.
It's my first platinum disc.
Wow.
First disc ever.
Yeah.
Not that material things mean anything,
but
but
you
if
can-
you walk into my bathroom, it's the first thing you'll
Nice.
see.
I think you can pat yourself on the back for that.
Funny. And then I got new management off the
Yeah.
back of that. So I have separate management for me being an artist and then
Yeah.
me being a writer. And yeah, I've just kept that career. That gave me the confidence to bring Lapsley back.
Yeah.
I wasn't fully ready to make my own label. So I signed like a 50-50 deal, which is like label services with Believe, and made the last record, Cautionary Tales of Youth, which was a bit of a learning process. I was still going through a lot in my personal life, and then made the last EP, finally found my new team, and Her Own Recordings like took off, and here we are, like 3 years since that point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, writing for other people, what did that experience teach you about yourself?
Writing for the people is an act of service, 100%. You can't bring your ego into the room in any way, or you won't get booked for another session with them. And I love that that's the complete opposite to my own writing for myself and for Lapsley. And I am so defiant about, for Lapsley, I don't really work with anyone else. I work with like one person. It's all on my terms because I created it, and I'm the only person. I'm the A&R. I am everything. It exists only on my terms and ethically with the people who I choose to like bring into it. And I can be more extreme in that sense because I'm quite extreme in the way that I want to serve other artists in their project. And I'm fascinated by the way that they experience life and the way that they use a turn of phrase. And I'm writing down everything they're saying in the session and trying to make sure that it's not just an abstract song about a random subject from ChatGPT. It's like, what are you going through in your life? What do you feel comfortable revealing, and what do you want to explore further or like find a little nuance with? And like, I'm working on Paloma Faith's new record at the moment, and it's just this like fascinating bond of being like having the privilege of being allowed in someone's life and understanding what they're going through, and then making their art with them and making their dream, whatever their goals and dreams are with that record come true.
And I guess in some ways you're on the therapist side. You know, I'm not saying you're the therapist and you're going to give advice to them, but
I think the people
absorbing...
skills aspect in terms of like listening.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, in reference to like earlier in church when I talk about like, I wasn't, well, yeah, the first half of my career, like I wasn't a very good listener. Like the patriarchy, like everything had turned me into the worst version of myself, and this has turned me into the best version of myself.
So let's jump into the last section of the song I'm going to pull out. So I've learned pride is just a thing that holds you back. It's just easier to shrink. Fit the box before you have to pack. Don't forget what they think. No one's going to salt the roads. I'm skating in between the cars to safety. Try to do what Joni said. My future daughter's in my head. I'm breaking.
God, that is quite,
the way you
intense.
Yeah, I mean, I love that Joni Mitchell gets a name check.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, it's funny that bit. There's you know, I wish I had a river I could skate away on, the Joni Mitchell river. No one's going to get me out of this. No one's going to help me. I'm the one who's going to have to face this. And then I guess there was just like this romantic link to the Joni Mitchell skating away. So it's like, if I'm going to have to skate through this, I could just skate away, which is kind of like giving up. Yeah, it's quite dark. It's quite dark, this verse, in a way that I wanted to bring the sincerity of like how I feel into this song.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and like I do genuinely feel like this sometimes about this subject.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to sugarcoat it if I'm actually going to go there. And this is definitely like the first song that I talk about this subject properly with.
The bit that broke me, I think, was that my future daughter's in my head. I'm breaking. So thinking about, future daughters. I mean, that could be literal, or that could be literally the future, future.
Yeah, both.
Future
I mean, it's a big thing I'm thinking about at the moment and talking about with my partner is like, you know, when we like plan to have kids, and I donated my eggs last year, and I went through this whole process of like thinking about, although, you know, the donation is to help another woman, like I guess the the ethical nature of like bringing another person into the world, and knowing that I have this like very maternal instinct and I've always wanted to have kids. But when you stop and you think about your experience of a woman, being a woman, and then you think about the experience of being a woman in different parts of the world, and, you know, would you want to put that onto a daughter? It was quite, it's been quite reflecting recently.
Yeah, definitely. Deep, massively deep reflection. I mean, so what would you say then for our final part in words? I mean, what future do you see?
I think we need to call out the issues that exist. I think there was a naivety which hurt me in terms of not being equipped for the world around me, whether that's not having the right support system and the cultures at B that prevent us from equality and equity.
I think that's kind of almost answered your previous question. I think, you know, if it is something that you do decide to do, which is to have children, or if you do decide to have, we can't decide to have a daughter, but you know, if you have a daughter, I think that's the next stage for us, is how we equip our daughters.
Yeah.
And that's something that you've kind of put in my head today.
It's funny, and you know, I was talking about The Politics of Motherhood, that book. It talks about like the good enough mum. And I think about that in terms of like the good enough activist, the good enough friend, the good enough daughter, the good enough partner, in terms of like doing the most we can, but not at the expense of our own autonomy. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I love your mind. What an incredible, and also, you know, a roller coaster of a journey that you've been on in this thing we call the music industry. Thank you for sharing, being so vulnerable. I'm so excited for this chapter of where you're at. I think it's really powerful. You're bringing everyone into your power and sharing it. And I think you're gonna inspire a whole new generation of artists. And there'll be so many artists that have been where you've been as well, and thinking about what does that next chapter look like for them. So I would love a line from the song to leave people with. So from Church, what should we leave people with?
I'm going to leave with the opening line. Always try to speak it for myself, loudest in the classroom. And I say that because my friends say it's my best quality, and it's something, and I've refound my voice in the last few years. So it's flipping that on its head.
Thank you so much, Lapsley. Album I'm a Hurricane, I'm a Woman in Love is out right now, and the song that we broke down, Church. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed making it. Now, please follow. That's very important. We want to know that you're out there and that you're listening. Please comment as well. This is very much a passion project. We're in a room, but I want to know that it's reaching you. I'd love to know your thoughts. We have some amazing artists that are sharing from the depths of their hearts. Does it resonate with you? What lines, what experience do you resonate with? Please share with us. And of course, if you want to watch the video, if you're not watching it already, you can watch it on YouTube. And lastly, we have got some amazing episodes for you to go back and listen to. Thank you.